I just figured I would put the Google Analytics for my autograder up here. And so right now, 2 days ago, I launched my latest iteration of my Programming for Everybody in Python class. It's a class, and if you're taking it, I have a sticker for you. If you took my Internet History class, I have a sticker for that as well. I like these stickers because it makes the virtual physical, right? I want people to say this is something real. It's not just sort of a fantasy. And so you'll see I meet students. The other thing that I do is I've had more face-to-face office hours by probably a factor of 10 than any other professor in MOOCs. I travel all over the world, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And so this is my Google Analytics of my autograder. So there are 43 people doing their homework right now out of my 70,000 students in my Python class right now. It launched Sunday at 3 in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock we realized I'd had a bug in my autograder software and grades weren't being flown and the students are freaking out. So I coded up little things. I fixed it all. So I was a little nervous because I was supposed to work on Sunday on these slides, but then my autograder crashed and I had to fix it. But what's beautiful about 70,000 students is because they're not being, they didn't pay for this class, they're a great QA team, right? So they're doing quality assurance on all of my technology and all of my software. So I just figured I would just show you that 41. We're doing pretty good. It's fun to watch as the sun goes around the world. And the United States is totally dark and there's nothing going on in the United States. And then later, all India and Australia is up doing their homework. And so it's quite fun. So let's see if I got this working. Oops. Yeah. So the title of my talk is How Will the MOOC Change Between Now and 2020? And when I came up with the title, which was only a couple of months ago, I probably just should have said, how will the MOOC change between now and 2016? Because I think that all of the stuff that I am saying is like far off in the future is not far off in the future. Daphne Kohler had a great interview on TechCrunch just 2 weeks ago where she said, and I'll reference it toward the end, so where she said basically the same thing, and I'm like, crap, I thought that was all secret. But apparently it's not all secret, and it's going to happen, and it's going to move really rapidly. The big theme of this is really the fact that anybody at this point who believes that they know what MOOCs are about is wrong. Everything we've seen up till now is merely a prototype that we're going to iterate on a couple of more times. And when we're done with that, it's going to be truly amazing. So if you think what we've seen so far is amazing, I believe we're going to look back at 2013 and 2014 and be like, whoa, that was kind of rugged. I'm surprised that people tolerated it as bad as that was, which is still amazing. So that to me is the potential and excitement. And for me, I am every 3 to 6 months. I'm lucky I go out to Coursera and hang out with their developers and we draw stuff on whiteboards. My brain is like flipped on its ear every 3 to 6 months. Things I thought were truth are like, whoa, I was totally wrong about that. And that's what's fun about it. And it means it's not done yet because we are seeing amazing change. So for those of you with your laptops open, you can visit these 3 URLs. That one is called Mastering Physics, Mastering Astronomy, and Mastering Python. And raise your hand when you visited all 3 and tell me which one is different than the others and tell me why it's different than the others. So this is my son. They always say that no person is capable of changing education in time for their own children, right? So my daughter is just about done with her master's degree, so I'm sure she used an LTI tool or two sometime in her career, so I may have touched my daughter's educational career. My son is in community college and about to go to 4-year school. And so we sit at my house and, we work on homework. And so he's taken 2 classes this semester. He's taken a Python class. I'm going to sit in the back one day. I teach Python at the University of Michigan. I have very opinionated views on how Python should be taught. And this other dude's teaching Python to my son.
I don't know what is Python. Is it a snake?
So you don't know Python?
No.
So Python is not the snake. Python is Monty Python, because it was in the 60s. And the whole idea of Monty Python had to do with the fact that Guido van Rossum, the inventor, was trying to do something that had an air of fun about it. So he named it after the sketch comedy Monty Python. Only later did they add the snake. The snake became later. And there's a whole long story about that The building I teach in is called the North Quad. We call it Quad Warts because it's much like some of the buildings here. It's fake Harry Potter Hogwarts. And my name is Severance, and so I happen to be in Slytherin. And so then I teach a class that is a way to talk to Python, the language versus Python. So it's fall semester and students that first come on campus. I come in costume with my hair, and I have a wand and have a Slytherin coffee cup and wear a Slytherin tie. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to talk about Harry Potter. I am the guy that walks in the bookstore with my son at the community college and pulls his credit card out and walks out with $300 to $500 every time. I believe that on average, every one of his textbooks has been more than the cost of the tuition in the class. They universally come from a company called Pearson or McGraw-Hill. And then he gets home and he really never opens the textbook. What he does is he gets on this website called Mastering Astronomy, one of the three that's different than the others, and he asks questions. He's asked questions. He has to do his homework. He works backwards from the questions, and we watch little videos and play flash animations. And you can't see it on this picture, but if you were in my office, you would see copyright 2008 right there. So they're selling for $168 a bunch of flash animations that somebody made in 2008. And as we talked about at lunch, thank heaven Pluto was gone by 2008, right? Because Pluto was gone in like 2006, but then all the mastering physics, mastering astronomy would be all wrong. And so this is how my son learns. A teacher who is basically controlled by Pearson. The teacher sort of does things. The teacher is told by my son, and we don't know how much we can trust him or not, but he really says the teacher doesn't do much, and so this content is doing all the work for him. And we're learning a lot of stuff, and I take a flashlight and an orange and I shine light at it, and we're having fun. And it's actually, I think astronomy is one of the hardest classes that any human really can take because there's so much in it, like infrared light. Like, why do we even need to know that stuff? But, so here's the thing. That's the problem. This is the problem that I think MOOCs actually need to solve. So I teach a couple of MOOCs. My first MOOC was Internet History, Technology, and Security, and I have the stickers for that if anyone's taken that. My second class, which is kind of my life passion, is the concept that every human being should know how to program. So one of my students at an office hour in New York City, he said, he explained this better than I could, and he said, in the future, every job is a programming job. Every job is a technology job. There are no suitable non-technology jobs. Whatever it is, there's going to be some data involved, some computing involved. You may be a printer, but you better know data, right? And so this class, I'm a trained computer scientist, and I believe that computer scientists have done a horrible job of teaching computing ever since computers were invented in 1947, because computer scientists think that math is a prerequisite to programming, and it's not. It's nowhere near a prerequisite to programming. Math is a reasonable prerequisite to computer science, but it's a horrible prerequisite to programming because it makes programming unapproachable for most people. So there's other courses taught by other computer scientists on Coursera, but I'm the only one that doesn't force you to learn calculus before you even start an if statement. And so this class is very successful because it lets people find their way into programming and then decide if they want to become super skilled or computer scientists or data miners or whatever. And I want people to come in. And so this is a class I've been working on for a very long time. Part of it has to do with the classes I teach at the University of Michigan. I'm not training computer scientists. I'm training the world's most nerdy librarians. So librarians, you think, well, what's going on in the library world? Well, it turns out not too many people are getting jobs in the librarian field. But if you're a librarian that can code Python, PHP, MySQL, and make up an RSS feed, you get a job really fast, okay? So all of our librarians are getting jobs in a field that's shrinking because we create technological librarians. Now, if you ask the question, how do you teach a librarian how to program? A lot of them have undergraduate degrees in comparative literature just because they never wanted to program. And so now I have to teach a class. So you build a class that's all about competency and about achieving competency rather than preparing for a life of computer science. I am a computer scientist and I love my computer science degree and I love what I was taught, but librarians don't need to know most of what I know. So I not only teach on Coursera online, I've created my own university. It's called the University of Dr.Chuck. So the way this worked is I went out to Stanford a couple of years ago, and Stanford had this thing called online.stanford.edu, and they were giving away free classes on it. And I'm like, okay, all these other schools that have online courses they're trying to make money off of, but Stanford's making online courses they're not trying to make money off of. So I come back, get off the plane all excited, and I tell Martha, our provost, I say, Martha, we need to make online.umich.edu. And we need to give free Michigan courses away on online.umich.edu. And she goes, well, I don't know about that. That's not such a great idea. We're busy right now, da-da-da. So I go to my dean. I say, Jeff, we need to make online.si.umich.edu and give away free courses on that. He goes, well, we're making a new undergraduate program. I don't want to invest time in that right now. I said, okay. I can't get my university to create a free online class thing. I can't get my college to create a free online class thing. So I'll just make online.drchuck.com. That is my university, and I'm in charge. I'm the president. I'm the dean. I'm the single faculty member, as a matter of fact, in the University of Dr. Chuck. And so over the weekend, I wrote up a MOOC environment. I actually used Moodle in this. It's got course registration. It's got badges. It's got certificates. I built all this stuff up, and I had this all running like 4 days later. And I'm like, so this is really so cool. So I sent a screenshot to both Martha Pollock, our provost, and Jeff, my dean, and I say, look what I've done. I've created the University of Dr. Chuck, and I'm awarding certificates to any student that will take a class at Dr. Chuck. And so Martha sends me a note. She says, could you come to my office sometime tomorrow? I'm like, oh. So Martha pulls me into the office, and she goes, Chuck, you're a faculty member. I can't exactly tell you what to do and not to do, but as a friend, and she was the one that hired me when she was a dean, she said, as a friend, my life would be a lot simpler as provost if you didn't award certificates at Dr. Chuck Online. I can't exactly explain to you why this would be difficult, but just trust me on this fact. And I'm like, okay, Martha, I won't award certificates. I'll just award badges instead. So I didn't. Turned out that Martha was in the middle of the conversation about monetizing Coursera with certificates, and it was a big secret, and I had stumbled into sort of like the secret negotiations. So I still do badges. But I also use this to prototype anything that I put up on Coursera. And so I have like 5,000 people who've taken my course on Dr. Chuck Online. 5,000 people in 2 years. I also do, this is one of my tattoos that was mentioned. This is called the Ring of Compliance. It's on my right shoulder. I think of this as my research CV for the past 5 years. And so my research area has been taking learning systems like Coursera, edX, and Sakai, and plugging tools into those systems, tools like Piazza, et cetera. And in the 2008-2009 timeframe, no one thought this was a good idea. All the vendors like Blackboard and Desire to Learn thought that this would harm their market share. And so I had to cajole them. And so I told Blackboard and Desire to Learn, I said, as soon as you comply with this standard and ship a product that does LTI, I will put your logo on my shoulder. So I started with Sakai logo, because I'm one of the chief architects of Sakai. Then I had the IMS logo, which is the standards organization that does interoperability. And then I put the Blackboard logo on. So I walked around with these 3 logos for a while. I went to the Blackboard conference and showed it off. And then I put the Desire to Learn logo on, and then Genzabar, OLAT, Learning Objects, a Canvas. That's the original Canvas logo for those of you early on in Canvas. And their new logo wouldn't be very good on a tattoo, Moodle, Angel. And then most recently, Coursera. I wrote some of the code that actually does LTI in Coursera. And I'm looking forward to later this year going out and helping write the LTI code for edX so that edX also has this. I just want everybody to have it. To me, standards and interoperability are Switzerland. Yeah?
Will there be any time for questions?
There will be plenty of time for questions. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of me and what I do. That's now. So this is the fight that I'm fighting right this minute. And this is the person that I'm fighting with. So this is a hockey team from 1999. For those of you not familiar with how old people play hockey, we call these things beer leagues. Okay, that means that you play with old people who've been playing for hockey for years and years and years and years, and you drink beer afterwards. So there's 2 people on this 1999 team. Interesting. There's a logo of a television program that I was co-host of called Nothing But Net. That's my Nothing But Net logo. And then there's me. I'm so much more handsome now than I was back in 1999. That's one advantage of being a male, is that the older you get, the more handsome you get, because I sure look terrible in this picture. But the guy sitting right next to me is the enemy. That is my thesis advisor. He is named Richard Enbody, and he's a faculty member at Michigan State University. And he's my center, and I'm his right wing, and we play pretty well together because we've been playing hockey together for a long time. But in this, he's the enemy. So the other side of my tattoo has, this is my research CV, and this is my education. So you pretty much can hire me by looking at my two tattoos. I got my PhD at Michigan State University in engineering, and I got my first faculty position at the University of Michigan in the School of Library Science. And then the background of my entire career, including my time on television, was backgrounded by the World Wide Web. So this is why he's the enemy. Because he wrote a Python textbook. He wrote it for Pearson. That's him. That's his Python textbook. Pearson. Look how much his book is. $92.90. But it doesn't stop there, because you can get an online thing for $105.45 so you can practice problems while you're taking Python. He makes a bit of money, but not that much money, because guess who's making all the money out of this $198 worth of stuff? A large $2 billion corporation he is helping fund. Not only that, but he signed the most draconian arrangement with Pearson that basically says you can't go in public for the next 20 years. If you mention Python, if you talk to another publisher, we're going to shoot you, something like that, right? It's just, he can't do anything. He can't make open source materials. He can't do this. He can't do that. He is stuck in Pearson, and they will give him his pittance each year going forward. And at the time, they make $198.35 every time somebody uses this book. Plenty of money to send salespeople around to badger community college teachers into buying this book. So what do you get, though? The market is not an idiot. The market sort of understands these things. You get a book. It turns out that's almost insignificant. You get automatic homework grading software. You get learning management system integration. You get instructor materials. You get slides and solutions, manuals, exam, course copy. You get instructor training. And in the example of, say, Pearson My Math Lab, you can hire an adjunct 3 days before the start of class, and they can be ready to teach with a full environment, homework problems and everything with Pearson's My Math Lab, 3 to 5 days. So you go like, holy crap, my adjunct just quit. Could you teach? You got a PhD in math and you're unemployed. Could you teach? Okay, Pearson My Math Lab is what we use. See you Tuesday. Students will be in room 107 at 11:45. Great. So it turns out that all the responsibility for effectively staffing calculus at community colleges has been taken over by Pearson. The dean just has to pick whoever shows up and say, you're the teacher, because Pearson does all the hard work. So it turns out, from that dean's perspective, $198 of the student's money is a bargain, because the dean has no responsibility, doesn't even have to maintain their faculty, can fire their adjuncts at will, hire a new adjunct in 30 minutes, because Pearson takes care of everything. So we think that it's the dean that's the problem. Maybe it's Pearson that's the problem. So if you look at the value proposition for this $198 book, you see much more than the book. The Pearson value proposition is teacher preparation, the book itself, marketing and salespeople going around the world selling the dang thing, software that backs it up. It's an amazing value proposition, and it's totally worth $198. So now this is the battle. We see the old guard, Pearson and their $200 book, and then here's my book. There's something very adiptal about what's going on here, right? The thesis advisor, the thesis advisee. So this is me, right? And that's my book. So what am I doing with my book? Because I'm like a badass guy. I have a motorcycle, and this is when I only had one tattoo, right? And I got this Programming for Everybody class. So is this just another MOOC? For me, this is a life purpose. It is not a MOOC. This MOOC is the MOOC that's going to make more teachers. It is a breeder reactor for new teachers around the world. It is not just a way for me to teach people how to program. It's how to teach people how to teach programming. And I send them away with a full set of open materials. Every single thing in this class is Creative Commons attribution. The videos, the audios, the PowerPoints, the autograder is copyright under an Apache license. Everything is free. So what I'm really doing is I'm using Coursera as an attractant to potential new teachers. Coursera becomes my marketing for my book and my software. I have an auto grader. It's pretty cool. It's all based on the browser. You can even do it with an iPad and all this stuff. I've tested this with 150,000 students already. Guess where the 150,000 students? Courtesy of Coursera. My QA team is 150,000 students around the world. I assure you that your 25 students are going to have absolutely no problem with this AutoGrader software. And I assure you that you can plug this into Sakai or Blackboard or Desire to Learn or anything else on the planet, and you will be able to teach a Python class. What's free in my book, in my world? Course enrollment is free. I am on Coursera. I'm on Dr.Chuck Online. I'm Blackboard's course sites. I will soon be on CanvasNet. One of my goals in life is every place, you can actually see me on P2PU if you like. I get like one student every 3 months on P2PU. My goal is every time there's a new place that gives away free courses, I want to be the first and ultimately only Python class in that environment. I want to be like the Python megazord of Python teaching. I want to make it so nobody else, everyone fears me, and no one is dumb enough to try to challenge me to be the all-powerful owner of the Python teaching marketplace. I am Pearson, right? I want to destroy, intimidate, whatever. You show up, you think you got a good idea, I've already been there, okay? I own it, I colonized it. But you can get a statement of accomplishment for free on Coursera, you get a badge for Dr.Chuck Online. I would have given you a certificate, but Martha told me I couldn't. The book is free in PDF, Mobi, EPUB, iBooks. It's all non-commercial. The lecture slides are CC BY, and all the videos and audios are CC BY, and the AutoGrader software is absolutely free. And as a matter of fact, if you read the back of my book, I tell people that I will remove the NC for any translation for publishing, so I allow people, we'll talk about that in a second. So what's not free? There is a revenue model. I am doing this for total world domination, and frankly, that would be enough for me. That's just how I roll. But it also helps to make money, because it makes my wife a lot happier when I stay up all night or drive to Notre Dame. So I sell a print textbook. Me and my best friend, Jeff Bezos, sell this textbook. It's $8.99. It costs about $3 to print it. The wholesale price of that book is $3. Jeff Bezos keeps $2 for the house, and I get about $2 for every textbook that I sell. And Jeff Bezos ships it around the world for me, and that's quite nice. And we also sell $40 certificates on Coursera. So my revenue, my conversion rate per student is about 1 in 200 buys the book, and I get $2.50 for 1 in 200 students in my Coursera class. My verified certificates in Coursera, 1 in 100 is my conversion rate. The revenue to me is $2 per, because Coursera takes 75%, then of the remaining 75%, the University of Michigan takes 75%, which leaves me like $2, because I get 25% and 25%. That goes into my research account, and that goes into my checking account. So I have two revenue streams. One buys me laptops and gives me travel money, and the other one gives me money. Both are very valuable, it turns out, because I don't pay taxes on this, right? I don't pay taxes on the money that goes into my research, and I can still get a nice laptop right here. So you can do the math yourself. So the first session of Python programming for everybody was 30,000 students. Session 2 was 73,000, Session 3, 73,000. Session 3 will probably be around 85,000 by the time I close registration. So you can add those up and divide them by 100 and multiply my revenue numbers, and you can figure out how much money I'm making right now, and I just got started, right? So if this is viral, then how much money am I going to make? If I triple how many students I'm doing in a year, how much money will I be putting in my checkbook and will be flowing into my research account? So my value proposition is I got a book. It's $9. I got teacher preparation. They take my Coursera class. I got a badass attitude, but that really is hardly valuable at all. I have free software. You can do auto-grading. It integrates into learning management systems. And I have marketing. My good friend Daphne at Coursera gives me the best marketing that you could possibly imagine, much more engaging than actually a salesperson walking in to badger some poor community college dean to take the textbook. But I have something else that Pearson doesn't actually have. I have a community. Because when you take my Coursera class, as a teacher, you don't leave. You stay. You meet other teachers. You watch other students. You help other people. You can blend your students, if you want, with the Coursera students. And I'll talk more about how that's going to be even easier in the future. So now you have a learning community that your teaching can be embedded in. You can watch how other people teach. You can meet other teachers. You can meet other students. You can be part of all this stuff. So for $9, I'm far better than Pearson could ever imagine being, because Pearson can't see what the future is going to look like. And being open and free has its advantages. I mentioned a revenue model. My revenue model is not a required revenue model. I work for tips effectively. But if you have 150,000 or 180,000 so far, and on average 1 out of 100 gives you a tip, it's a pretty good deal. But I'm kind of like a barista at my class. But here's the interesting thing. Last semester, in the middle of my class, I decided to convert all my slides from PowerPoint to Google presentation. And I sent a note out to 70,000 of my closest friends. I said, hey, some of you people might want to translate this. Turns out, in the early days of Coursera, we did a better job of translation. And I would, when I first did internet history back in 2012, I would put up a lecture and within a week it'd be in 10 to 20 languages. And I'm like, why do people do this? Are they just like angels and they've been waiting to do great work for the whole world? And I finally started talking to some of them and I asked them, why is it that within 1 week you translate my lectures? And you put Arabic and French and Spanish, and all my lectures are translated. Coursera kind of messed up their software so that it doesn't happen as fast as it did back then, but in the first time, within 7 days, most lectures had closed captions in 10 to 20 languages. The reason they did it was out of pure selfishness. They were not trying to make the world a better place at all. It turned out they could take the captions that Coursera produced in English, translate those captions, and then re-upload the captions in their language, and then they would watch my lecture. They would actually not watch my lecture until they put captions on it. Because watching my lecture with Spanish captions going by, they could easily translate the words to Spanish. There's gadgets that do most of that translation for them. So they would re-upload it for themselves. And then hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of other people for the next 5 years would benefit from it. And every once in a while someone would find a mistake and tweak them. So they're very selfish. Not selfish in a bad way, but selfish in a good way. So I said, hey, how many people would like to help me translate these slides? Within about a month, the course was being translated into 30 languages on Google. The way I did this is I just made a Google Drive, and I made a Google group, and I had people join the Google group, and they would announce their presence, and I would give them right permission to whatever language they asked. I did not vet them. I did not check their credentials. If they said, I want to help with the French language, I gave them permission to the Google Drive folder. There was only one situation where there was a bit of a fight because I'd added too many. Can you imagine what language might be the language that there might be some argument among the various translators? What language would you think that might be? What? German? No, not German. German people are logical. I mean, that's not Russian. Russian. I got a complete Russian translation. The Spaniards. Hot-blooded Spaniards. Then you've got your Latin American Spaniards and your Spanish Spaniards. There were people that translated things and then tore down their translations because somebody offended them, and finally the offended people left, and now we're doing fine on the Spanish translations. The calm people are. So the only sort of problem I had in 30 languages was the Spaniards fought with. I think it was actually the Latin American Spaniards fought among themselves. So there's two Spanishes. There's a Latin American Spanish, and there is a European Spanish. We keep those folks apart. And my book sits there, Creative Commons Non-Commercial on GitHub, and I ran into a woman at a conference, and she and her husband are missionaries going to Costa Rica, and they're trying to teach kids in Costa Rica programming. She goes, I'll translate your book. I say, fork me on GitHub. So she did. She forked me on GitHub. She started translating. So only the first few chapters have made it to Spanish. I'll flip these slides. So let me tell you this Korea story. So this guy contacts me in Korea, and he says, I want to translate your book to Korean. I'm like, okay, fork me on GitHub, right? The thing's on GitHub. They forked the repo on GitHub, and he starts translating it. He translated it really fast. And another 4 weeks later, he's like, I got it all done. I'm like, okay. He says, now I want to translate the slides. And so he goes in the slides. He starts translating the slides. The next thing I know, I'm seeing on Twitter him teaching class, taking pictures of his students. In Korea, you can sort of see this is one of my exercises with part translated. And then he sends me a note. He says, the reason I'm so passionate about this is I've translated several Python books before into Korean. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. He said, and there is a Korean initiative to get K-12 kids to learn programming, and I'd like to use this book. And I said, oh, really? I said, then we should probably come up with an arrangement that allows you to print on demand that Korean book in Korea. He said, funny you should mention that. In November, Amazon is going to be able to print on demand in Korea for the same rough costs. So we negotiated an arrangement. And guess how much money I'm going to make from every single book that's sold in Korea of the translated version of my book? Guess how much money I'm going to make?
50 cents.
Wrong. Right. Right. I'm going to make absolutely no money whatsoever. That was our arrangement. Guess who's going to make all the money? That guy. Because he translated it. Was I going to translate to Korean? We could wait forever. Do I really and truly need to make money off the Korean version of my textbook? I don't. This is how I make money. I stand in this little room right here, in this building, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and every single one of these chairs cost $3,500 to sit in for 15 weeks, 3 hours a week. And the university graciously shares some of that money with me. I do pretty darn well. I don't need to make even a penny off of the Korean copies of my textbook. I don't have to make a penny off the Spanish, Chinese, or anything else. I just need to find somebody crazy enough in each of those languages to translate it and then print on demand in those countries. Ha, Pearson, take that, right? I will be in 30 languages for $8. Pearson, you're going to show up in Vietnam, and I'm going to be there first, right? I'm going to be in Vietnam before Pearson is in Vietnam. And you watch Daphne or Anant, and everybody has these apocryphal stories. The thing about this that's cool, if you're given talks about this, is when you're telling an apocryphal story, usually you're telling an apocryphal story about something that happened in the last 24 hours. So this is my apocryphal story from the last 24 hours. This happened this morning at 6 o'clock. Okay? This is not the one apocryphal story. This is today's apocryphal story. This is a guy, I think, from India, teaching rural poor children Python. They don't have enough connectivity to stream the videos. So what they do is they take all my Creative Commons videos and they download them. And they stick them on a DVD and they ship them to the kids all over where they're doing this, and then they have them take quizzes online, right? And they're saying, is there any way that we can get the subtitles? Because the students would understand your lectures better with subtitles. So I just asked Coursera, because the Coursera has made English subtitles, and all I have to do is hand them the files. And they could download them from Coursera, but the person asked. Technically, they're not mine. I believe Coursera will respond to me by the end of today and say, of course they can have the SRT files, which are the translations. And so this guy will construct a class on a DVD, exactly what their students need, and ship it to all those kids, right? And you see my super TA, which you're going to meet in just a second, Sue Blumenberg, right? And so 4 hours, he sends this thing in. 4 hours later, Sue shows up. Sue says, yo, this one's something you probably ought to take a look at. My TA, she's my TA, unpaid, has worked for me for 2 years for absolutely nothing. Okay, so let's take a look at some data. That's actually just what I'm doing right now. So everyone's seen this kind of a graph. We're tired of this kind of a graph. We start with a lot of students. We end with, not so many students. Down we go, down we go, down we go, down we go. I'm going to show you a different version of this graph. I'm going to show you the version, this is a 3-month semester class. But if we expand this to 6 months, this is what my enrollment looks like. So the day I close enrollment on one semester of my Python class, enrollment starts to build. And then it starts to build and build and build. Sometimes I'm getting close to 2,000 to 3,000 enrollments a day in my class. And I think this little thing is when Coursera starts promoting it, say a month before the course starts, there's some kind of promotion that happens and my chart goes up. And so this is my previous course, and so I made 73,000 was the top number. There's a little overlap between the start of the course. But here's the interesting thing. Less than half of the people don't even click the button to come to the course. Then of the people that click the button in the course, less than half of those people make it through the end of the first week. So this data point right here is the number of people that actually watched the first lecture. This data point is the number of people that watched the first quiz. And so, funk, like, whoa, that was really valuable to like drag all those people into this class and then have them ignore it. And now, after that, we see this gentle decline. And usually if you compare this number to this number in all measures of my class, it's about 32% retention rate between the end of the first week and the end of the last week of the class. 32% of the students who start with me finish with me. Okay, so that's interesting. Now you ask yourself, did we miss something? Is there an opportunity that we missed in these 70,000 people that on that day, 500 people wanted to take this class, but they had to wait a month and a half before it started. On that day, 2,000 people wanted to take that class, but they had to wait 6 weeks to take, Is there something better we could do with these people who have desire to take this class right this minute, right? So here's another thing. This is my internet history class. For those who've taken my internet history class, it has 3 basic topics. Internet history has a secret, my Python class has a secret and hidden agenda to create programmers around the world and manufacture teachers. This has a different hidden agenda. This hidden agenda is to turn liberal arts people into technology people. So this class actually has several trick points in it. There are trap doors in it that I get you. So there are 3 topics. The first topic in this class is history. The second topic in this class is the TCP/IP stack and how windowing works and how packet retransmission and how IP addresses work and how routers are constructed. That's the second topic. And the third topic is the mathematics behind security. And so people start this class and I'm like, oh, in 1947 there was this like war, and then they built an Enigma and the Germans are running around, and then Alan Turing figured this thing out and they made a bomba, and look at all this thing, I got all this video, very much for your liberal artsy kind of person, like this is cool. And then at 1 week they wake up and I'm like, now we're going to talk about an abstraction, and it's got TCP/IP and the IP layer and the Ethernet layer and all this stuff, and you see the Ethernet packet and the MAC address. I mean, literally, I have questions like, is this a MAC address or an IP address? What's the difference between a network number and an IP address? That's the quizzes in the second half. And the third part of the class, I give them quiz questions that are encoded, and I make them decode the quiz questions with an online decoder so they can answer the quiz questions. And I talk about the math of whatever. So what I've done is I've tricked these poor liberal arts majors into looking at the math. And at the end, I want them then to say, maybe I like technology. Oh, here's a Python class. Perfect. Okay. So this is really a feeder class to my other class, even though I built it first. So as we look at this graph, can you tell which week this class greatly increases in difficulty? Again, I'm tricking people. I draw them in, and then bam, it's harder. Then bam, it's a little harder. Totally changing the topic of the class. Can you tell? I can't. Those are the days. Those are the days when this class, on each of those days, becomes dramatically harder than the day before. And nobody leaves. But people are leaving all the time. So what does this tell us? They're leaving because they had a flat tire. They're leaving because daycare went bad. They're leaving because they went on vacation. And because I have scheduled deadlines, they don't come back. They miss a week, they never come back, right? They don't want to be imperfect. They don't want to get a 90%, even though 90% is passing and they'll get a certificate. Something goes wrong, they miss a week, they get busy, something else happens. It is not because the course sucks or that they're not doing well in the course, because I would see a drop here, right? Because I make the course harder. Why doesn't it drop there? Interestingly, it picks up after the hardest part of the class because people are like done being bored. It's like, whoa, security, that's interesting. So you see a little uptick in the security class. So the answer to this, of course, is self-paced. And if you listen to the Daphne thing, you'll talk to self-paced, and I think Anant's talking a lot about self-paced. But there's a lot of advantages to not being self-paced, right? I'm a faculty member. I live in 15-week rhythms. I know what 55 minutes are. I know what PowerPoint is. I know how to teach in 55 minutes 3 times a week, 15 weeks. I know when to start. I know what the middle is. I know how to create a story. I know how to engage my students for that time. I don't know how to make a self-paced class. That's why Pearson makes all the self-paced classes, because we faculty don't know how to do it. So face-to-face structure and the scheduled MOOC structure is such a nice thing. So you just take somebody who's got a well-built class and you sort of move into the MOOC structure, say, look, it's going to be fine. It also allows you to do kind of quality assurance, like you know what the launch date is, so you test, and then you launch. Of course, it still breaks, and then you fix it, but you kind of know. And then students are going through your stuff 1 week at a time, so they break different things, and they complain about different things, and you can stay on top of it. So you can really quality assurance your class as a teacher. You can monitor it, your TAs can monitor it. And you get time off between semesters, right? You're done, got 4 or 5 weeks. What we do is we have kind of 12-week MOOC classes, so we kind of have 3 weeks off at the beginning of the semester, start a MOOC, then we have 2 weeks off at the end of the semester after MOOC's finished. It's kind of nice to not be on all the time. And so when Christmas break comes, I'm neither teaching a MOOC nor teaching a regular class. And so we have like MOOC mesters, which are smaller than semesters, and we start them and end them. And it is really great for faculty because it sort of fits into our on-campus rhythm. And if you don't want to teach in the summer, want to go to your cottage all summer, you go to your cottage all summer and don't teach a MOOC. So the bottom line is it fits our lives. It fits the pedagogy that we understand. It allows us to build stuff that we know how to build. But it turns out after you've done it like I have for 9 or 10 times, it's really tiresome to do a scheduled MOOC. Changing the dates every freaking time is like, oh, change these dates, change that dates. And it turns out that some months have 30 days and some months have 31 days, and so your auto date shifter switches from Thursdays to Wednesdays. It's like, oh, come on. And then the students wake up and they go, oh, there's all these bugs and the syllabus doesn't match the calendar, yada, yada, blah. And then if you have software like I do, and you say, oh, it's time in between classes, and I'm gonna make my changes now. So I change all the software between classes, and I test the heck out of it in between classes with no students. And then, bam, 2 o'clock in the morning, software crashes as soon as the students. No good plan ever survives first contact with the enemy. And so all the work I do when I have no students in my classes breaks as soon as the students re-arrive. Now, usually I'm a pretty good programmer, so it's usually only like 10, 12 hours before I fix everything, and I'm really, you can see me not sweating here, and that's because my class is over 2 days old now, and I think my technology, knock on wood, is pretty solid. There's no good way to take. So the first week of class is always crazy one way or the other. You screwed something up and 100,000 people just descended on the stuff that you've been making. Students always want extensions for extenuating circumstances, and the stories are gripping and riveting. And there is nothing in Coursera that lets you give one student a deadline out of 100,000. And if you did, then your email inbox would be flooded with requests for one-day extensions, and you just can't do that. Somebody said the way to respond to Coursera email when they finally find your inbox is just don't answer because they're going to be pissed no matter what you say. And so if you apologize, say I can't do that, why not just like delete the message and not reply to it? I apologize to ones where they're asking me, I don't apologize, I reply to ones where they ask me advice, but I don't reply for ones that sort of just ask for extensions. And some students are really chomping at the bit. They want to get that certificate. They're in, they want to hurry, right? They're always asking to go faster. I'm like, look, this class is designed for students who are not as talented as you, so just relax. I'm like, I hate you, okay? If you make a mistake, like you mistype something on the syllabus, you got to extend the schedule. Like, my TAs are like, but you said it here and here. It was the 18th there, and it was the 12th there. I'm like, oh, crap, okay, I got to move to the 18th. And now I'm like doing certificates on Christmas Eve. And the last part of the class to award all the certificates, get everything done, that's like another 1 or 2 days. I got to talk to Coursera, and I'm like, oh, they forgot this thing. My grading formula's not right. Oh, we'll start over. My students are like, where's my certificate? So I know how to develop these things, but then when you do it over and over and over, it becomes super annoying, super annoying. But there's also problems with self-paced because you have to think of different ways of teaching, right? You don't have a cohort. The cohort is not following your lead of do this, do this, do this, do this. Like they got this peer grading thing in Coursera, which is okay. It's not too great. I don't think any of these MOOC people have great peer grading systems at this point. So I built my own. I built my own peer grading system. I call it social streaming peer grading. The way it works is you hand in your assignment, you're immediately presented 2 students to grade, and if there's enough students doing that peer assignment at the same time, by the time you come back from grading their assignment, someone else has graded your assignment, and you're done. If not, you come back a half hour later and your thing's graded. No, like do this for a week, then do this for a week, then do that for a week, and 3 weeks later you actually get your grades. So I built this in LTI. The next thing we got to do is contextualize help by time and topic. So if you remember the autograder picture, probably the next feature I'm going to add to the autograder picture is 2 buttons called I'm willing to help people with this homework assignment, and another button says I need help on this homework assignment. That help button goes to my software. Let me tell you what I know. I know who did well on the assignment. I know when they did well on the assignment. I know that they just finished the assignment within the last 4 days. I know that I've only asked them one other time for help and that they came back and actually helped the person. So they can have a help button and I can give them the exact right tutor out of all my other students. I don't even have to hire tutors. I just need to connect the right students, and my own data will tell me who I should hook up. Now, anonymity is important in this because there's so many things about anonymity in these MOOCs. One that you might not think about is sometimes somewhat famous people end up in MOOCs. Like the dean of a college of engineering from another school might be in my MOOC. They're going to want to be anonymous. Not because they are hiding or shielding themselves. They just don't want someone saying, holy crap, my dean's in this class with me, right? And the dean seems to say stupid things in the chat room. Here, let me take a screenshot of the dumb things that the dean says. So I got to be able to get people to help each other. I got to build all new technology. Now it turns out, I went out to Coursera about 2 months ago, and I showed them all this stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, we're kind of building something like that too. I'm like, yeah, but I bet I'll get it done before you will, and I will, because they're trying to build a whole system, a whole self-paced system, and I'm just building this one thing. If you start having a discussion board that lasts 10 years, there's got to be some way. It's nice in a scheduled class to throw the discussions away. So that is a whole new technology of discussion boards that last forever but still feel fresh. Right? If you go to most discussion boards and you find that all the posts are from 2007, instantly you're not happy with that. Right? Content needs to be perfect, because the last thing you need is 100,000 people looking at every part of your course on the exact same time. You don't know what they're working on. If you're doing it in a schedule, you can limit that risk. You need a community and a culture of people that actually stay, and this goes back to the bringing teachers into it. And can you ever take time off as a teacher? Can you ever take a vacation? And what is the role of the teacher? Once you've got this perfect world built, do you just walk away from it? I hate that. I live for these folks. I built this to watch them teach. I sit and watch analytics sometimes, go like, I'm teaching. That's what I'm doing. My analytics tell me that. So here's a couple of things. And I'm probably really lucky. These are my lead TAs, and they've all been with me for over 2 years now, and they've never been paid a cent. They've gotten a free t-shirt from Coursera, that's about it. So when I'm an open source guy, and one thing I learned about building communities is the person who's the leader must model the right behavior to bring others into the community. So if the leader says, I am Oz the Great and Terrible, and you're all supposed to worship me, then no one actually joins you. Everyone just waits for you to do everything at the middle. So when I first taught my very first course, I basically vowed to never answer any student's questions. I would wait until another student would answer the question. I would monitor very carefully, and as soon as some student would answer a question, you'd see a post from me saying, thank you, Sarah. That was exactly what I would have said if I didn't have time, and I never had time, and I really appreciate the fact that you so quickly answered this question. So over time, the students are like, oh, I get rewarded for answering people's questions. And the only time this guy shows up is when I answer somebody's question. So the students in that very first class started taking over the class and making it their own. And they became furious. At one point, I did a peer-graded assignment, and the students started a discussion forum about my rubric that pretty much said, Dr. Chuck's rubric sucks, right? And this one lady, I think her name was Deb, it's 2 years ago now, she was like a rubric expert, and she was ripping on my rubric. And so I wait for this to fire up and get all heated up. And so I show up in the Dr. Chuck's rubric sucks discussion, and I say, boy, you people are smart. You know so much more about rubrics than I do. So I've started another threaded discussion into which I've pasted the rubric that I came up with, which I agree sucks. And I would like you to edit this rubric and argue about it until you have a rubric that you think is the appropriate rubric for this class. So off they go. And this Deb lady, she sort of agreed to sort of be the facilitator of the rubric argument discussion. And so in about 3 days, they'd come up with a rubric. So what do? I cut and paste their rubric from that threaded discussion into Coursera, and that's the rubric that I used in the second peer-graded assignment in Coursera, and I've used that rubric ever since. But by modeling this notion that the students own it, and I'm just kind of like entertainment, and I'm like the guy that shows up and pats people on the back, I had this leadership emerge. And Coursera has so much data as to who the leaders are in this class. We invented the concept of community TAs, which is now pretty normal. But part of it is also the modeling of the teacher that says that these people are important, and they're not just drudge workers, right? They're not just moderators in a forum. These are actual co-teachers. And I bring them up, and I reference them. If you go into the first announcement of my first class, I say, welcome to the class, and I sign it, Chuck, Mason, Morrow, Sue, right? So I promote them as high as they can be, and they love me. Not only do they love me, but they make more TAs. They make more TAs. They find the next round. And then when I created second class, I took my lead TAs to my Python class and I said, who are we going to turn the old class over to? Because I don't want you to do both my classes because you're going to have a nervous breakdown. So they handpicked all my TAs, and now Herb and Herb and Pat, 3-letter female name, Sue comes up. So Herb and Pat are my TAs in my IHTS, and they'd been there for years as sort of like the second-tier TAs, and now they're the first-tier TAs. This is like DNA, bringing forward over time. But if we switch to self-paced, the DNA never has to leave. We don't have to bring the DNA forward. And so this is the DNA of my class. They learned, Sue, Mason, and Morrow, not only know the material, but they know how to make communities now, because they watched me make the community that they became part of. And so they understand how to bring people in and bring new people in. And the fact that they're the lead TAs means that they're servants rather than powerful, right? Another thing I do that nobody else does is I have face-to-face office hours. Starbucks had this thing called Meet Me at Starbucks all over the world. Well, they stole that idea from me. I've been doing this for years. So I've got about 30 different videos from different locations, ranging from, let's see, that'd be London, that's Barcelona, that's Seoul, Korea, that's Amsterdam. And I basically send an email to 200,000 of my closest friends, and I say, I'm going to be at this Starbucks in Amsterdam from 10 to noon on Friday morning. And I just sit and wait. It's like your classic blind date where you have a rose and a book, right? And I'm like, maybe no one's going to show up. And then they start coming. So like I had about 25 people in New York City. I had people in Miami, all over the world. And everyone was like, well, are you doing this just to do this? I'm like, well, no, I'm giving a talk, this afternoon. I would have done one here, but I was just too busy. But I would have done one here in some coffee shop. And then what I do is I videotape them. And then I put them up. And I send them around. So what my students call me now is Anthony Bourdain. So my students who later meet me, so it's really kind of cool to have a student that takes one of my MOOCs and then comes on campus and ends up in my class. They start calling me Anthony Bourdain, right? Because I go so many places and I make videos. So the thing about Anthony Bourdain is he only goes to these places once, but they play that stuff over and over and over and over again. So it seems like he's always in China, right? Seems like I'm always in Korea or New York City. So I make videos that basically make it interesting. So if you start thinking about what a teacher does in a self-paced environment, I'm going to travel around like Anthony Bourdain. I'm going to meet my students. I'm going to make videos. And every once in a while, there'll be a brand new video this week. What section are the students studying? I just don't care, right? I am sort of the social motivator, the Anthony Bourdain of my class, right? And I show up in the forums when I feel like it. If I take a week off, no one will even know if I take a week off because I kind of don't do anything. I'm just kind of like this little sparkle on the class. I'm not really the machine at all. But if I can make self-paced work, right, my workload goes to almost nothing. My revenue goes way up. Because Coursera is going to make it so you can buy your certificate at the very end rather than at the very beginning, which their experiments suggest they're going to double or triple the rate of closure. I believe that we'll go from if you look at the average of that number, they're seeing 8,000 students continuously working, new coming in, some coming out. So the numbers are going to be really, really, really strong for these self-paced courses when it works. But you can't do it right away because if you'd have told me when I started this that I needed to build a self-paced class, I would have said, forget it, I'm not going to bother. I can't think that much. I got to teach my classes. I had to walk the walk, learn about changing pedagogy, learning about changing assessment, learning about how to build communities, learning about how to use this software, and that's what it took. Oh, we're almost running out of time, but I'm almost done, sorry. So this is my new plan for world domination, and I'm actually partway through in this class I'm building right now. There's a PHP MySQL class. So the first class I teach a class, I pick a book, I hate the book, I develop a bunch of slides, come in late to class, half asleep, I basically live through the class, right? And at the end, I got some set of slides that roughly works. The second semester, I'm better off. I clean up my slides, I fine-tune the materials, and I live through it. The third semester, I build an autograder, I record the lecture, and I sort of do a mini flip of my own classroom, right? So I can flip my own classroom a little bit. I get my lecture stuff built up. I think my slides are in good shape. The fourth semester, I write a 250-page book on the material. Not a 700-page book, a 250-page book that costs exactly $2.50 at Amazon wholesale. Then I go and teach myself a scheduled MOOC, which debugs my online version of my class. right? And I'm also getting all my students to find the bugs and typos in my book, which happens to be on GitHub, which means they can send typos into me without even knowing me. And then after that, I convert my MOOC to self-paced, and then I just make money. I travel around the world, I make videos, and send funny videos to my class once in a great while, so it's a big vlog for me. I got 8,000 people who can't wait for my next vlog entry. And so I'm going to do this for every class that I teach at this point. I'm going to create a franchise around every class that I teach, and I'm hopeful that no one listening or no one at Notre Dame figures this out and starts teaching a PHP class, because I'm going to teach PHP and I'm going to teach Python and history of the internet, and I think I'll be fine. But I'm just hoping that nobody figures out what my plans are before I've totally established a beachhead in all these worlds and all these countries and in all these teaching environments, so that I don't care if you want to teach calculus. You can have calculus, but I want Python to be all mine. So you can watch this class being built. I first built a static website with the content and let students look at that, both my on-campus and off-campus students. The next step is to put it on Dr.Chuck Online as a simple self-paced class with 20 or 30 students. I don't care, but I'm using those folks to test my materials. If they live through it, then I must be that it works. So I always use Dr.Chuck Online as my staging area before I put a course up on Coursera. So my first Coursera class is actually, has already been QA'd by distance education students, but in the hundreds and thousands rather than the 100,000s that I'm going to see in Coursera. So that'd be pretty impressive if that was it. But that's not the end. That's not even close to the end. That's not the best way to make money. If you imagine that there is a self-paced fabric up there, a community up there, free materials up there, a book up there. Now what we want to do is exactly like Pearson My Math Lab. We want to get a community college teacher to show up 5 days before class, take all my stuff, put a few deadlines on it, add a few bits and pieces that are their custom little bits, their little custom lectures, and use my material as the class that they're teaching. And the student has to go write a $9 book, and then they pay Coursera, let's just say $20 for the online thing that Coursera runs, but it's really a community college class that plugs into their learning management system using learning tools interoperability. So I have completely replicated the Pearson experience for $30. And I'll probably pull out 10 of those dollars for myself. And now every community college in the world, and if I translate these things, high schools, community colleges, will use my stuff instead of Pearson's stuff. Pearson's so dumb and so slow that I got years before they figure this out. And I will crush them. I will crush Pearson. So the real win is when this becomes material that's re-instanced into a community college. Just like my math lab is itself self-paced material that can go on any time scale. This is not. But then you also see this beautiful transparency where my community college students can flow into a bigger community if the teacher so desires, and they can see where they fit in a much larger community and see all the other students all around the planet that are also taking the same course. So it's not just self-paced, it's self-paced, multiple instance, multiple timed the same way, but yet all connected together somehow through analytics, data, and communication. So as I said, Daphne went public with a lot of things that they've been talking about in Coursera 10 days ago. And if you saw Daphne's talk, which is down here in my slides, she sort of said very much what I said, except she says it much more eloquently and much quicker than I do. But the quote from this that I think is the most important quote of all is that Daphne was asked if her company was an education company. And Daphne said, my company is not an education company. My company is a technology company. My company produces technology that allows universities like University of Michigan and Princeton to project their brand without having to write that software. So let's listen to what Daphne's saying for just a second. Say, this is a technology company. I'm going to ask you a question. And those of you who know the answer from last night while we were drinking, don't answer. Assume that in 2 years, Daphne sells Coursera for $1 billion. Who did Daphne sell the company to, and why did they buy it? Remember, it's a technology company, because it's not my content, because Daphne can't give my content to Amazon. Oh, Jesus Christ.
That was a prayer, right?
Daphne cannot give my content to this unnamed organization. Well, I screwed that up, didn't I? I totally screwed that up. The answer is Amazon. So Amazon is going to be the publisher of the future. What I just described is a way for me as a faculty member to move from classroom teacher to massive content creator. It'll all be hosted on Amazon servers. Apparently Jeff Bezos has a few CPUs that he's got. Jeff Bezos is about the software, not about the content. He will let me build the content. Jeff Bezos will become my marketing arm. Jeff Bezos will sell more books. Jeff Bezos will make the $50 for every community college student or $25 for every community college student. Me and Jeff Bezos are going to fly off into the distance. And Daphne Kohler wrote the software that Jeff Bezos needs to take over the entire universe. So Jeff Bezos will write a check for $1 billion to Daphne so he can have the software. And guess what? By the way, I'm not speaking for Coursera, and I'm not revealing any secret information. This is just me fantasizing, right? Daphne gets to keep Coursera because Coursera is actually more of a marketing activity than technology. Jeff Bezos can go off and use her software to create the Pearson of the future, which is a Pearson that we all own because we'll all be part of it, just like self-publishing, right? And Daphne can keep Coursera, and we can keep it. We can keep teaching our classes in Coursera, and then we can make a whole bunch of money. And the Lindas of the world go away, and all those things like Linda go away, and Jeff Bezos wins. Any questions?